of course, the Quran, we're looking at, it has 6,236 ayahs, all right, 6,236 ayahs, 114 surahs, all right, and it would actually tell you for every single chapter, it will actually tell you what surah this is. So let's just go in the beginning. That way we could just see some of the things. The Quran that you would have with you, not all the Masahif have that, but we're just going to just see, like, okay, when I hold the Quran, what does this actually mean? All right, so here we go. I'm just going to start. So right there, it says Al-Quran al-Karim bil-Rasm al-Uthmani. So what is bil-Rasm al-Uthmani? All right, so bil-Rasm al-Uthmani is basically a specific writing that the Prophet ﷺ actually, alaykum salam. So it's actually a specific writing that the Prophet ﷺ himself actually ordered the Sahaba to write it in. So what does that actually mean? So you might see the word shajarat with an open ta and not with a closed ta. Let me draw it so you could actually see it. All right, so you will see, for example, right there, you might see the word shajarat, like in Surah Al-Dukhan, is actually with this ta. And you might actually see in other places, it's with this kind of ta. You might look at the word, for example, as-salata with a waw right there. And you're like, but it's silent. So why do we say it? So that was actually sorry, because it's university policy. It's okay. I don't mind, but sometimes I just have to take it down. All right. So when you look at the writing itself is also part of the let's call it the waqf part. What do we mean by waqf? That just like the way that the words were recited is actually it's actually mawquf, it's actually tawqif, that this is how the Prophet ﷺ recited it, this is how we're going to recite it. Well, it's not just the words and the meanings, and not only the sound as well, but even the way it is written. So the Quran is preserved in all these different elements. Even in the way it was written, it's not based on how you sound out the word. It's actually also based on the writing that the Prophet ﷺ approved of. Wait a minute, I thought the Prophet ﷺ was illiterate. So what was that? How's that going to be? So the Prophet ﷺ was giving them certain instructions, even though he was not an expert in writing, but he did actually later learn how to write, but he wasn't an expert. All right, he wasn't an expert. So the most important ones when we're looking at a Rasm al-Uthmani right there, the most important ones to write were, you've got Ka'b, you've got Ali ibn Abi Talib, Uthman bin Affan. You had the four Khulafa were some of the most important ones. And you also had Mu'awiyah ibn Abi Sufyan was one, Amr ibn al-As was one. You had a number of different Sahaba that were actually writing the Quran. But it has nothing to do when we're looking at Rasm al-Uthmani. It doesn't mean that that's how all the details of the writing was from the Prophet ﷺ. There were actually a number of different stages that happened and took place in terms of the drawing. What we mean by drawing was really not drawing per se, but in Arabic it's called drawing, but in English what's really scribing. All right, so you could see right there that the one to actually do the khat, which is the calligraphy, is actually Uthman Taha. He did it for all the 10 qira'at. And he would spend, I actually watched an interview with him, he would actually spend 3 years on every Quran just scribing it. 3 years. And of course, right there you got Dar al-Ma'rifah is basically the publishing company. And Dar al-Ma'rifah, by the way, yes, here it says Syria and where is it, Tab'a Rabi'a, etc. But they're actually a whole team that overlooks them. They're all hafadha. So all of the different people on there in this, to make this copy right there present and accessible to us, are actually all hafadha the Quran. They had all memorized the Quran. All right, so now let's go and further move on. Let me just make sure that the camera is turned off. All right, so Mushaf al-Tajweed. What does it mean, Mushaf al-Tajweed? I want you to look at these beautiful colors right there. It makes it actually really easy. I love these colors. And these colors, believe it or not, they actually contain all the different rules of Tajweed. All the different rules of Tajweed. You've got the mudud are pretty much on this prism color. And you've got the ones that are not mudud, the ones mad al-iwad, and well, mad al-iwad is part of the mudud, but you've got some of them, you've got al-idhar, al-tarqiq, al-tafkhim, qalqala, etc. And then those ones are more on the spectrum where there is either a combination, so you're pretty much assimilating something in something, and that actually involves here. But this is more of the elimination of something. So the gray ones are really eliminating certain letters. So you've got the gray L, which is the L, like al-shams. You're not going to say al-shams. When you see that lam right there, that would actually mean you're eliminating the L. All right. When you see, for example, it's called alif al-tarfiq al-jama'a, like for example, ظالمون, all right, or ظالمون, or for example, اجمعوا أمركم. It's more in the verb than it's not in the name, but alif al-tafriq, that alif al-jama'a is more is actually in a verb. So you will see it, for example, اجمعوا, and you will see that alif right there. You see what I mean? Now, they put it for you in gray in order to tell you that indication that it's actually silent. All right, Hamzat al-Wasl. Hamzat al-Wasl is basically that alif with that tadpole on the top right there. That we'll see it. Don't worry, you'll get to see all of them. So just an idea, all the gray ones are pretty much the silent ones. The green ones are pretty much those combination where it involves a nasal twang. The light blue means the bouncing. The dark blue is really the thick letters. All the red spectrums are really the extension ones. So you got 28 different rulings. Although the hardest part is really when you're looking at the colors. You're involving a number of different rules, but you really have to take that time to kind of practice on it to really see when do I apply this, how do I actually apply this, etc. And inshallah, you'll be able to read like a pro. Now let's continue right there. We've got this one is they're basically telling you about the history. So the history of the description of the Quran. So you got the beginning during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. This was really how they were scribing it. It was really this small. All right, this it's really not small per se, but it was more in terms of no dots, and like you could see right there, no dots, none of that. And then more was added. And the reason why more was added was because more and more people that were not familiar with the Arabic language, so they ended up not really being able to read it. So then they added more indications to make the letters distinctive, because you've got the noon, the ba, and the ta. They pretty much have very similar shapes. Although they had the noon a little bit bigger, wider, but still. All right, for somebody that's not familiar with the Lugha Arabiya, it would actually be harder. Then finally, they'll actually tell you right there. So this is during the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is the time of the Prophet ﷺ, how the scription was. This is the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib and how the scription was. And of course, this is the time of the Khalifa Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan was an Umayyad Khalifa. Al-Khilafah al-Umayyah ended in 132 Hijriya. And then after that, of course, so the Umayyad Khilafah was between 41 Hijriya and 132 Hijriya. Right? Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he's also the same one that actually built Masjid al-Aqsa, or let's call it designed and etc. All right, so that's when more was added by Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, in where you could see some dots were added. Let's maybe get the image a little bit bigger so we could see it. Some dots were added, some indication of Fatha, Dhamma, Kasra were added as well in order to bring about those differences. By the way, this is Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wal tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad wattaqullah. This is the same thing, and so is this. You see the difference? You see the difference? Now, let's move on right there. Of course, you've got in the final thing, what you have right here, they actually wanted to add more than just the letters and the writing and how you pronounce the letter, but they also wanted to add those areas of tajweed as well. So you've got the greens where there's a nasal twang, the ra, which is dark blue, a thick sound. You've got the gray where you have to take out the N sound of it, the meme where you have to again, press and make a nasal twang with it. And again, right there, take out that N sound of it. That's what, remember, all the grays you take out. All right. And then khabirum bima ta'malun indicated that meme right there, which is definitely not seen here. Khabirum bima. Where is it? Oh, they actually added more here. But still, during this era, that indication of the un sound to be flipped into an M was only indicated in this copy. So you have the updated copy. All right, now this page is basically telling you that this copy was overseen by Al-Azhar, some of the most important scholars. I want you to look at some of the most important scholars right there. All right, even though their handwriting or their signatures are not really that clear. But you got Mahmoud Amin al-Tantawi. You got, I'm just trying to see some of the, all right, so anyhow, I can't see all the names. But those are some of the most important scholars that had reviewed this copy. And of course, all of them are Hafadha. All of them are Hafadha, and the top. Of course, this was reviewed by Al-Azhar. Right, so let's see the date, about 1999, pretty long time ago, not an updated copy, it takes a lot. Now, as for this page, it tells you what that color angle, that colored shape that we had and what they would mean right there. So I want you to look at this because this is actually making it easier. All right, so let's see. You got mad lazim, sit harakat. It tells you here that it takes 6 counts. Alif Lam Mim, and that indicated what takes 6 counts. They indicated that, hey, it's the Lam and the Mim that takes 6 counts, not the Alif. All right, and then they would tell you Idgham La Yulfad. If it's gray, it's like it's silent. What is silent? Well, it's basically the tanween, the un sound. Maybe I can make it bigger for those to see. All right, now they told you Mad Wajib. It's basically telling you this is the mad wajib right there, and they indicated in 2 ways: 1 in putting it in red, 2 in putting it in with a sign, giving you that wave sign on the top right there, which is really similar to this one, really similar to that one as well. Those are actually called mad ard lisukun. It would be 2 or 4 or 6. Now you want to be careful because mad is only in the a or the u or the e. You're not going to find an l as a mad. You'll only find it in the a or the u or the e or the ha. We'll talk about that later. Now, right there, Madharakatan telling you, well, they gave you this little kind of like, I don't know what to call that, a yellow that's a shy yellow, or I don't know what they call it. All right, right there. I know you guys, for those, the good news, women, there's barely any woman that's colorblind. We always see everything in color. All right. Both of my sons are actually colorblind. Whoa. Both of my sons, and colorblind only comes from the mom's genes. I guess I'll be held accountable and responsible for that. But yep, both of my kids. And there's actually a story. My son, his teacher, Somali, mashallah aliha, she was complaining that my son was just having a bad attitude and where he's not obeying the rules. And she would tell him to stand on one side if he's wearing that color, and another side if he's wearing that color, and to color the red in R, the R in red and the green in the G in green, etc. But he was doing everything all messed up. She was really angry at him, and then she called me for a parent conference. I go for the parent conference and I say, Jazakallah khairan for telling me about my color. My son is actually colorblind. Oh man, ya haram, she really felt bad. She really felt bad. All right, so enough about color blindness, alhamdulillah. So there is another way to learn the rules of tajweed, which is, I would say, the long way, which is if got a noon and then followed by a lam, yarmilun, you know, those that would be idgham bi ghunna, etc. But I actually found using the colors to be a great alternative, and I actually have kids that are 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds using the color coded without knowing all those rules of tajweed, and they do an outstanding job. All right, you can see right there, Deb, right there, Madlazim as well, and where they indicated for you in the color purple, or is that purple? Well, and I guess I'm colorblind too. That's actually red. All right, no, I can see red, don't worry. All right, so right there, they actually said Mad'arad al-Sukun twice. This is the same as this one, all right? So I guess they forgot to mention that it was the same. All right, now going to Madharakatan, which is what I was actually telling you about, this little guy, that E and the Ha, and they would have a little baby U here or an E. This is supposed to be an E right there. So what am I going to do? Min dunihi E? No. You're going to say min dunihi. All right. Now, here's the thing, is that this Ha, if there is a Hamza after it, they will actually indicate by putting a wave on top of that in order for you to make it as a he when you do it. Min dunihi. All right, indicate it. Or they might actually, of course, if it's a who, they will actually put you an u right there, and it would be, for example, it can't be dunuhu, but hawehu. All right, so it would be hawehu. Well, there's no hawehu in the Quran to be read like that. I can't think of anything right now, you guys. I'm so sorry. I didn't get my coffee. All right, so here we go. If it would have a wave on top, then it would be who, and just like we extended the other one. Now, as for these are probably the most common ones that come in. So let me comment on that one. So you've got right there, if you just allow me. Here we go. So you have the gray ones. I want you to pay attention to this one because you got a gray and a green, and you got a gray and a black. You got a gray and a black. Where is it? We'll get to it. All right. So the grays and greens are basically the ones you could see right there. You're taking out the N sound of it. If it's an an, or N, the tanween, dam, tanween, fatha, tanween, kasr, you're taking out the N sound of it, and then you're going to blend it with the one after it. So you're going to hear me say like the gray and the green, for example. I usually say it in a form like this, and take out the N sound, connect and press. Take out the N sound, connect and press. What are we doing? Take out the N sound, connect and press. What am I pressing on? You're pressing on the meme right there. So fi dhalalim mubin. All right, take out the N sound, connect and press. Connect with what? Connect with the following letter and then press. All right, so let's see right here. So this one, although you could see it's gray and green, but the gray, they're actually telling you right there, only when you see that top meme on the top right there, you're going to basically understand that the N sound is going to be flipped into an M sound. All right. The N sound is not going to sound like an N anymore, but it's going to sound like an M. M as in Mary, for those that, are confusing the letters. All right. So rawasiya, you could see that right there, that raw, that's dark blue, ra. There are almost 16 rules for the ra, but thanks to those that wrote the Quran, they actually indicated it for you for the ra al-mufakhama, for the thick ra by putting it for you in dark blue. It's actually really good. Now, the other part is that when you see only the noon and the meme, and the good thing is that they put you every time you have to press on the noon or the meme, they basically put it to you in green. So Jannatu, Jannatun Na'im. Notice I pressed on that one, and then I pressed on this one. All right, let's go more right there. And the light blue, my favorite color, what did it indicate? And it indicated it that it was qalqala. So qalqala just means you're giving it a bounce. Waqa, waqa, and it's only going to be in 5 letters. Qa and ta and ba and jim and dal. Qa, ta, ba, jad, qutub, jad. All right, now you go, let's move on. And you've got right there the only green ones. So look at this one. So whenever you see a noon or a tanween that's gray, there are actually going to be 17 letters after it. 17 is it? Yeah, 17 letters. They will actually indicate for you. Look at this. There's no gray, right? The ones that don't have a gray, it basically means you're going to make the N sound like from your nose. So, but you're not going to say, oh, no. The nasal sound is really going to be technically on the following letter, right? So, ansa, ansa, ansa in this example. Anfu, not anfu, anfu, anfusihim, for example. Or ansabil, ansabil, not ansabili. So don't make the noon as if it has its own sound like, all right? So you're actually putting that in sound really on the letter that's after it. Let's look at this one. You could see right there that gray letter. That's not an un or an n or an n. None of the tanweens and none of the n's. So what do? Take out the n sound. What's the rule? Take out the n sound, connect and press. Again, take out the n sound, connect and press. Take out the n sound, connect and press. So here's one thing. Take out the n sound. Am I going to connect and press? You're not going to press here, because take out the n sound, connect and press is really when there's the gray and the green. All right. When there's the gray and the green, that's when take out the n sound, connect and press. All right. Let's move on right there. And of course, they're giving you those signs. Well, this one anyways, right there telling you don't mention that one, which is really similar to this one. Min Rabbihim. You're not going to take out the n sound, connect and press here because because it's called idgham bighayri ghunna, but you're not going to connect and press because this is not green. All right. So what do we do here? Wa rahmatan lil muhsinin. I'm not going to connect and press. وَرَحْمَةً لِلْمُحْسِنِينَ and say, well, there's a shadda right there. All right, so color code speaking, all you're going to do, وَرَحْمَةً لِلْمُحْسِنِينَ. All right, now let's move on. See, those color codes, they're really making things easy. And if at all you forget, and you're like, okay, what did she say on that one? The good news, we've got this recorded. And the other good news is that they put it for you right there. The word mad. It's not mad, it's mad. Mad is getting angry, but this is mad to mean extension. Extending, you're lengthening that letter, all right? The lengthening part of it. All right, now you've got the different red spectrums, and you've got this little, I don't know what should we call this color, guys? What is that color? That which is like this one.
What is it? Is it gold?
Mustard. Okay, mustard. Yeah, there you go. Based on food. All right, here we go. Now these green ones. You've got, we just talked about it, and where it's more of a no sound. We mentioned it before. Let's move on right there. Don't worry, here we go. So Kalimat al-Quran, this is basically telling you who actually did the tafsir wa bayan, which is at the end of the Quran. We're going to check it out in just a bit. All right, so right there, this is the Hassan Muhammad Makhluf. He's actually a scholar from Al-Azhar and even has some books in Usul al-Fiqh. We studied his book during our undergrad years. All right, so our first surah is going to be Al-Fatiha, and a number of things to mention. I'm just going to write A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. Yes, it's not an A, but I'm going to write it right there so we can just demonstrate some things. A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. All right, I'm just going to, yeah, this is erasable, so it won't be there forever. All right, so just a number of things, rulings pertaining to, we're going to call it number one. We're going to call A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim number one. We're going to call Bismillah Rahman Rahim number two. We're going to call Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen number three. And we're going to call this number four, the end of the A. So for that, there are actually four different rulings for A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim and Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Well, let's put in right there. Okay. Oops. Hold on. Okay. Let's put in a number of different rules. So I can add 1 and 2 and stop. We're talking about this one and this one. So I can say, A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. I can also stop at 1. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I can stop at 1 and then, so comma, and then stop at 2. That's all right. I can also combine 1 and 2 together. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Combining 1 and 2. I can also...
Dr. Aysha?
Yep, I can hear
I
you.
have
Go
a question. Sorry.
Mhm.
So the other surah that you were just doing right now, that was Surah Al-Luqman, right?
The other surah was Surah Luqman. Right now we're doing Surah...
I have a question about it. So you were connecting the ayahs based on colors, on how
based
they
on
look?
colors. Yep, based on colors. We're connecting the letters, the words, based on the colors.
Okay, but some kutubs, they don't have colors, right? So how would you just, so how am I gonna assume?
The Qur'ans that don't have colors, you basically have to learn the rules of tajweed. In other words, the hard way to really know the rules of tajweed.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I was confused.
I do have a whole series on tajweed, all the rules pretty much, using the actual rules of tajweed. A whole series on my YouTube. Check it out.
Okay.
What's the YouTube channel? You might as well shout it out.
Gems of Light. It's called Gems of Light, and Aysha was. Yeah, you'll see it. Yeah, it's really...
Search up your name, all of your videos.
Oh, yeah. She just told me.
This is the
No,
first
I'll
time
give
I
it to
met
you.
you.
So let's continue right there. So you got the other part. The other part that you could do is that you could add 1 and 2 and 3. Let's do it. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. That's all right. All right. Now, what is not all right? Let's see. And I'm going right there. Hold on, you guys. Don't be scared. What am I going to do is just a simple thing. All right. Now, we're going to make this smaller so you can see it. What is not okay to do is making it, for example, right there, I'm going to say, وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ. You can't do that. Why? Because you just made Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim seem as if it was the last ayah in Surah Al-Fatiha. Got it? You don't want to do that. Let's move on. So what else is not okay to do? Well, you want to make sure that when you actually read the Quran, you read it as mentioned, as you see. You got to take the time to learn it. Now, that's pretty much really easy in terms of A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. Now, there are a number of different things when we talk about, well, do I have to read the qira'ah, kind of like Abdul Basit, in where it's mid, and he's going to all that. Here's one thing. Those are actually called the maqamat. Maqamat, in where it's the harmony of qira'ah, it has nothing to do with the science of Quran, period. With me here? Nothing. That maqamat, that's a musical note. That's not anything related to Quran.
Okay.
Yes, it sounds magnificent. It is just breathtaking. There's no doubt about that. But maqamat, if we apply the maqam and we don't apply the ruling of tajweed, that's actually haram.
Oh.
All right? Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, that you have to read the Quran as it was revealed.
Okay.
All right? So to actually recite the Quran by focusing on the sound and not the way that it was revealed is actually a form of lahan. It's actually a form of lahan. What is lahan? Lahan is putting in a mistake within your qira'ah. All right? There are two kinds of lahan. The first kind of lahan is actually a clear lahan, in where you're, instead of saying Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, you're saying Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. What did you just do? You just made Alhamdu become Alhamdu. You just made the Ha into a Ha, or the Ain into Al Alameen. You just made a big major mistake right there. Or Alhamdulillah, making the Dhamma into a Fatha, or the opposite, or making the Ha into a Ha, or the Ain into an A. That's actually a clear mistake. The other types of mistakes are basically the mistakes that are not necessarily clear. So what does it mean, not necessarily clear? So it's really those are subliminal mistakes, which we call lahan khafi. And those are more within the sciences of tajweed. For example, instead of saying waladdallin, you're saying waladdallin. Because the a right there, this is actually called mad lazim. You actually have to extend it 6 counts. So what if I didn't know that, and I just used to say waladdallin, and I thought it was just the imam during the masjid that is supposed to be making it long. Believe it or not, scholars actually had differences of opinions on whether that salah is valid or not. Shafi'i was probably the most strict on that, but we can make the story short. Inshallah, yu'dharu al-mar' bil-jahl. In this situation, you would be, inshallah, dismissed because you did not know the ruling. So this is not like the major rulings in where you would have to have known it, being in an era where information is possible, but it can happen where we're actually looking at these are very intricate, very small details. All right, so the other thing that people would ask about is really the speeds, and those are the different speeds of qira'ah. We talked about the maqamat, and although they're beautiful maqamat, speaking about the maqamat, let's go back to that one. The beautiful maqamat, you've got, maqam, nahawand, iraq, and all those beautiful maqamat. Can I read in those maqamat? Can I learn those maqamat? You can learn the maqamat, but to actually think that it's part of the science of Quran is actually dangerous. That's number one. Number two, to apply the maqam and leave out the rule of tajweed is actually haram. And you've got some qurra that will do that. Not Minshawi, never does that. Minshawi is actually probably the greatest qari. Minshawi and al-Husari, probably the greatest qari, greatest qurra. You have other reciters that will actually do that right now, famous reciters. You'll find them on YouTube, etc., that might actually do that. Now, the other thing is that when we're talking about the speeds, all right? Now, the speed is a different thing. The slowest one is called tahqiq. What is tahqiq? Remember when Abdul Basit, for example, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ, and he'll take really taking his time to read that, right? This is actually called tahqiq. And the reason why it's called tahqiq is because he's giving the amount of time to articulate each and every single letter. All right, now, then you've got the tartil. Tartil is really a little bit faster. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. All right, tartil. Then you got tadwir. Tadwir happens a lot during قراءات التراويح. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم. Tadwir. Hadr is the fastest one anywhere, usually when they're about to rush to finish the Quran. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. That's Hadr. So which is the preferred? Are they all permissible? They're all permissible to read. Which is preferred is really tartil. Hadr is usually used for those that are trying to memorize the Quran because they don't have time, so they need to memorize it, and they will use that hadr in order to memorize it, and of course review it as fast as possible. So they will use the hadr. Tasmi' usually happens with tadwir or tartil depending on you and the shaykh that's actually working with you. All right, so let's move on right there. The other issue is, do I have to have tahara? That's actually a whole different debate between scholars. What do we mean by tahara? As women, of course, the most important tahara that we're talking about is really when we're talking about the cycle. Okay, I'm talking right now about the cycle. The other tahara, differences of opinions between scholars on whether when you hold the Quran, whether you have to have wudu or not. Okay, that's number one. The part that I would like to focus on is the issue of cycle. Scholars actually had several differences of opinions on that. The first opinion said you can read it orally, but not holding the Quran, the actual copy. All right. The second opinion said you can read it orally and even hold the copy. Doesn't make a difference. The third opinion said depending on the circumstance. So what does it mean, circumstance? They said things like darura, you needed to do ruqya, or you are a Quran teacher and you wanted to instruct, or you wanted to memorize and you were afraid that within these 7 days without memorization or revision that you might forget. So those are the things called darura ilmiya, which is really the Maliki madhab. All right, consider it as a darura, as a necessity for the sake of education. All right, so those are. The fourth opinion said doesn't matter whether she's holding the Quran, reading it with her orally, that is, whether she needed to read Quran because of ibadah or whether because of education, there's no difference. Now, why couldn't they come to an agreement? So the reason why they had differences of opinions is really, number one, is really al-ayah. لا يمسه إلا المطهرون in Surah Al-Waqi'ah. But when we look at لا يمسه إلا المطهرون in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, the scholars actually had differences of opinions on the word لا يمسه. All right. So when you look at the word لا يمسه, there's that pronoun ha. In English, it's basically it. None shall touch it unless they're in a state of purification. So is it referring to, now here's the thing, is that within those ayat in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, there were actually a number of different nouns that were mentioned in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, at least within those ayat. The first noun, you've got the Quran in general. The second noun was actually talking about the Lawh al-Mahfuz. Lawh al-Mahfuz, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the tablet that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala scribed things in. Now that's a Lawh al-Mahfuz. So scholars actually, by looking at Lawh al-Mahfuz, for sure you and I are not going to touch a Lawh al-Mahfuz because that's in the heavens. That's part of al-Ghaib. So the scholars that said it was referring to Lawh al-Mahfuz said that it is actually referring to Lawh al-Mahfuz. Therefore, the mutahharun is referred to the malaika. Got it? The none shall touch it unless the pure ones. So those scholars that said that it refers to Lawh al-Mahfuz said al-mutahharun is referring to al-malaika, not people. The second opinion that said, no, this is referring to the Quran. And they said, it's referring to the Quran, and it's clearly saying that none shall touch it but those that are pure. And what makes tahara is tahara from the major impurity or minor impurity. Remember, there are two different opinions. Don't get confused, all right? The first, are you guys getting lost? Okay, good. The first opinion said you cannot touch it, but you could read it.
Yeah.
All right. So that was one major evidence for those that said you can't touch it, but you can read it.
Yeah.
Said, oh, it's talking about touching. It's not talking about reading.
Yeah.
All right. So that was one of their evidence. Now, the other scholars that said, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون, then they had differences of opinions. Are we talking about major impurity or minor impurity? What's the difference? Major impurity requires that you take a shower. Major impurity.
Yeah.
You take a shower after a cycle, after intercourse, you have to take a shower.
Yep.
Major impurity. Minor impurity, you just need to do wudu for it. Just do wudu for it. You went to the bathroom, passed gas, you need vomited according to some scholars, all right? You need to do wudu. So then, like I said, they had al-mutahharun, and they had differences of opinions on, is it talking about mutahhar, meaning that you have to have wudu every time you read? Or is it talking about it's enough that you are at least not in a state of janaba? Now, here's one thing. The scholars also had differences of opinions, even on major impurities, on whether they can hold the Quran or not. I know this is probably one of the, let me call it, rarely known around people. Everybody thinks that, all scholars unanimously agreed that if you're in a state of janaba, what is a state of janaba? Meaning that you had intercourse or a wet dream, all right, and you didn't take a shower. In other words, any state of ejaculation/orgasm actually requires a shower. Now, can I touch the Quran before taking the shower? That's what scholars had differences of opinions on. Majority said, no, you cannot, because of another hadith.
Okay.
All right. Now, Ibn Hazm was one of those scholars that said, no. That hadith regarded it as da'if, and this ayah said it refers to Lawh al-Mahfuz, therefore does not apply. Therefore, whether you are in a state of janaba, major impurity or minor impurity, you can still touch and read the Quran. All right. Am I necessarily pro that opinion? Wait up. All right. Hold on. So when we're speaking about women on their cycle, was that the only evidence? It wasn't the only evidence that scholars actually quoted or pinpointed. There's actually a number of different ahadith. But here's one thing. Those ahadith, there are actually debates on whether they are authentic or not. Why would they debate a hadith if it's authentic or not? Is that even possible? It's either yes or no. Well, not quite, because there are 5 different conditions for a hadith to be sahih. 5 different conditions for any hadith to be authentic. Mattasala isnaduhu, that the chain of narration is connected. Maybe we could actually, let's see, open a Word document right there. Hold on, I just, just open a Word document. We're actually doing
Do you teach classes here?
Yeah, I do.
What classes?
Hold on. So then we're looking at, what were we saying?
The 5
Conditions.
Conditions.
Yeah.
All right. So for a hadith to be authentic, you got five major conditions. اتصل إسناده. اتصل إسناده, meaning that the chain of narration, all right, is actually connected. All right. Two, بنقل العدل الضابط. So then we're talking about the transmission here. All right. What transmission? Transmitting the hadith. How is it going from one instructor, from one narrator to another narrator? Well, we're not just talking about the way that it was transmitted. One, every single narrator on there, how are they in their one, deen, two, akhlaq, three, when we're talking about akhlaq, we're also talking about integrity. All right. Now, when we're talking about some of these things, we're talking about also the transmission. Did they actually meet, or were they really in the same era? What does al-adl actually mean? What does it mean to be good in deen, good in akhlaq, etc.? All right. What does it really mean? Well, here's the thing. When we actually speak some of those things, we would all agree in terms of deen, that the person is not drinking. That's common sense. But what if that person was not necessarily he's not doing haram major sins, but that person wasn't always attending jama'ah? All right, let's give another one. Let's say this person, in terms of akhlaq, all right, in terms of akhlaq, this person was really good in akhlaq, but there was somebody that actually didn't want to say details about how that person's akhlaq are. So I came to her and I asked Sister X, I said, what do you think of Sister Amal? And she said, she's okay. What does she's okay actually mean? Is that meaning that she's actually good? Or does that mean, well, she's on the side? What do you mean by that? All right. So that's where things can be really fluid in how we can, same thing with integrity. For example, some scholars would say, well, it's not part of integrity to eat in public. Not part of integrity to eat in public. And therefore, somebody's eating in public and somebody said they witnessed and seen in public, eating in public, and that person lacks integrity. Muru'ah. We're going to refuse their hadith. So some of that fluidity can also happen even in the way we would consider a narrator to be on the authentic side or the less authentic side. That person is known to hating, let's say, maybe Uthman bin Affan or whatever it is. Even though some of the narrators that were shuyukh even for al-Bukhari were actually mentioned to actually have Shi'ism in them, but they will still take from their hadith. Some of the scholars of Bukhari are actually Shia. All right. So when you look at how do they actually have differences of opinions on such matters, well, that's the same thing in where we're looking at why do we really see. All right, hold on. I'm trying to get that, but it doesn't want to appear. Why do we actually see those differences of opinions, even though shouldn't it be clear and shouldn't it be right there obvious? Well, that's where, just like they had different interpretations on the way we understand the text, we also had differences of interpretations on how we understand what integrity means, right? What does it mean to be good in akhlaq? What you might consider as part of akhlaq being Somali is not what I consider part of akhlaq in Palestinian. To you guys, it's okay. To me, I might find out, oh my God, did she just actually ask her if she had bananas at home? In my
Yeah.
culture, to actually ask the person if they had such and such at home is ape.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah.
But it's normal in your culture to actually say, yeah, thanks for offering the rice, but do you actually have bananas that sit next to it? Can't eat rice without bananas.
Yeah.
All right. But in my culture, no. Probably in the Pakistani culture, you put bananas next to their biryani, they're going to just, that's it. Get out of my house right now. Would you guys do that? Maybe if it's pilau.
We'll probably just be like, that's kind of weird, but okay.
It's kind of weird. There you go.
Bananas to their food. I never knew that. I just tell you know if you wanted it, you could, but it doesn't like.
There you go. They're like,
I'm
you
just
know,
telling you that it just
the
it's snack.
biryani, the pilau, and the greatness that it contains within it. How dare you put a banana next to it? Why would you do such a thing? It's actually degrading the magnificence of a pilau.
I'm just telling you, the combination works.
It goes chutney, next to it. Chutney, you got, what else? There you go, karahi and all those different things. You can't put a banana next to it. All right, so just really fast, when we look at these differences of opinions, it's really important to understand that when there are differences of opinions, number one, don't be too strict that it's only one way. If it's differences of opinions between scholars, I'm not talking about differences of opinions where, who knows what person is telling me and who knows Abu Layth or whatever his name is actually telling me he's not a scholar. Or if we're not talking about the scholars that really understood the Quran, really understood the Sunnah, we're talking about those scholars that were approved by scholars, that these people are scholars. These people are qualified to review Quran, Sunnah, Hadith, and Athar, and actually review the Fiqh, al-Usul, etc. Those are the people that I would say, if there is an opinion of such that contained some of those evidences, I wouldn't be so stingy about it and probably get the sister, you got your period, get out of the masjid right now. Take it easy. All right. It is actually 12:03, so we'll see you all, inshallah, next week.
Tuesday.
Inshallah, next Tuesday. I hope the weather gets better.
Yes.
All right. So let's see here. Are we learning Tajweed? We're actually going all over. That's a good question. What are we learning? I came a bit late. What pages are these? We're still going over the Quran, just general rulings still. So yeah, and sweetheart. Mish'al, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you cure, Habibti, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you good health, and Allah yahfadhku ya Rabbi. So inshallah, it's not actually a markaz. Maybe we could show you. We're actually in a university. Hold on. Maybe I can show you guys where we're at. Hold on. We have to first turn off.
Your online class?
Yeah, there is online